Hello and welcome back to Ryder's BlockBuster. My name is Creed, and the other day I was in the mood for something weird. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to watch, and my friend Suplex came up to me and said, hey, I've got this alien movie called Xtro, and it might fit the bill. And boy, oh boy, was he correct. This movie is an alien movie, but that's about the only thing that I'd call regular about it. It takes twists and turns and flops everything up on its head, and just absolutely loved it. Let's go ahead and hop into this and talk about what happens in Extro. Also, just be warned, there will be spoilers in this breakdown, so there you go, there's the warning. We open on a countryside cottage where we meet Tony and his dad Sam. They're playing in the yard when Sam throws a stick into the air and it collides with something that explodes and turns the sky dark. The wind picks up and light from the sky begins to descend onto Sam. Tony watches his dad struggle against the wind and light, only to finally disappear. We cut away to see Tony waking up from a bad dream 3 years later. His mother, Rachel, rushes in to calm the boy down, and as she walks to bed, we meet Annalise, who is the family's au pair, and Joe, who is Rachel's new boyfriend.
Joe. The who? Joe Mama.
We also see an object drifting through the sky that night. In the woods, a creature crawls from the dirt in a sequence that made me think a lot of like the Uruk-hai from the Lord of the Rings. Fun fact, they actually hired a mime to play this creature because it could bend in a certain way that they wanted and had knobby looking elbows and knees. A car driving down the road spots the creature and slams on the brakes to go investigate. The well-dressed man sees the wounded creature, but before he can do much, he's attacked and killed. While the woman is looking for her partner, she's suddenly grabbed by the creature and she screams before we cut away. The creature stumbles upon a little cottage, and the woman who lives there thinks that she hears someone outside. She locks her doors and grabs a shotgun, but is tripped by the creature. We watch as it climbs on top of her and places an undulating tentacle over her mouth. Back at the apartment, Rachel is comforting Tony when her hand slips beneath the covers and she sees blood. Pulling back the covers, Tony is absolutely covered in the stuff. They call a doctor, but Tony isn't hurt. He has no wounds, and when asked where the blood came from, all he says is that his dad sent it. The woman who was attacked wakes up and sees a shedded skin on the ground beside her. She tries to walk but stumbles as a pain in her abdomen begins to grow. We watch as her belly rapidly expands. She falls to the ground and she dies, and then we watch Sam crawl from her as if he were being born. Sam goes into the woods and finds the body of the well-dressed man and takes his clothes. He also takes the couple's car, leaving the body of the woman in the passenger seat as he drives. Sam tries to call Rachel later that day, but it seems his vocal cords aren't quite working. And as the call goes on for a few seconds, the phone begins to melt. During breakfast, Tony gets in trouble for having his pet snake, Harry, at the dinner table. He puts the snake back in the cage before heading to school. On their way down the stairs, we meet the downstairs neighbor named Mrs. Goodman, and we get this little cute interaction.
Tony, come on.
Getting so tall. Work hard at your lessons, young man. Diligence pays.
Tony!
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Annalise takes Tony to school, but when Rachel goes to pick him up later that day, the teacher says that Tony's father has already come and picked him up. Rachel runs in the direction that the teacher says they headed, and she sees Sam step from the shadows. When he's asked about where he's been, Sam says that he isn't sure. He can't remember anything from the time that he's been gone. And when he learns that it's been 3 years, he seems shocked.
Sam, what's the last thing that you remember?
The cottage. We were at the cottage. I was with Tony. You'd gone away. And it started.
What did?
First this light. This brilliant light above me. I could see Tony was scared. kept yelling, but I couldn't hear him. It was as if I was held in that light. And a wind, a strong wind. It was hot. Felt good.
Sounds like one of Tony's stories. Was it you on the phone this morning?
No, this is Patrick.
Joe comes home and they send Tony out so that they all can talk. I think it's really cute here how the Connect 4 shows that Sam has already won a few different times, but he's being a good dad. He doesn't call out the W until Tony finally gets his own victory. When Rachel goes to get some drinks, Joe asks Sam what he wants, and he replies,
I want to be home.
This isn't your home anymore. That should be obvious.
Joe joins Rachel in the kitchen, and he makes it obvious that he doesn't believe Sam's story at all. Joe tries to convince Rachel not to trust Sam, but she's hesitant. A part of her still loves him, is still clinging on to that old relationship that they had. In Tony's room, Sam steals the eggs from Harry's cage and squeezes them into his mouth. Tony walks in on him and runs out of the apartment. Sam runs after him, seeing the elevator go down and then racing into the streets behind him. They rush through the alleyways until Tony finds a place to hide, but Sam is able to find him rather easily. While this is going on, we see Harry escape from his cage and slither into a slat in the wall. Rachel sees that Tony and Sam are gone, and she gets worried that Sam has taken Tony. She and Joe run through the streets to try and find them. Sam calls out to Tony, asking what's wrong. When Tony says that he's scared, because his dad was eating Harry's eggs, Sam tells Tony that he's different now. He was taken somewhere, and in order to live, they had to change him. He says that he came back for Tony, and when the boy allows his father to get close, Sam begins to suck on his collarbone. Rachel and Joe get back to the apartment where Sam and Tony are waiting. When asked where they were, Sam says that they went to get some sweets and everything seems just fine. At dinner, Annalise comments that Sam looks younger than he did in all of the photos that she's seen of him. Joe then tells Sam that Rachel will be divorcing him and that he intends to marry her. In reply, Sam throws a bottle at Joe and storms off.
You're out of your fucking mind!
Meanwhile, in Tony's room, Tony is staring at his toy when it suddenly begins to play by itself. Sam walks into Tony's room and tells the boy that he is different now. He'll be able to do lots of things just by thinking about them, and that he'll know when to use his new abilities. Tony asks Sam if he likes Annalise, and Sam says that he does. He thinks she's perfect for what they need and instructs Tony not to damage her. We see Harry crawl through a hole in Mrs. Goodman's ceiling and fall into her salad. When the old woman sees the snake, she goes ballistic and smashes it with a hammer.
Snake, are you okay? Snake? Snake!
She then takes the dead snake up to Tony's apartment.
I'm sorry. She's just a stupid woman.
Tony closes himself in his room with his dad and stares at his toy soldier.
Tony? No. Tony? Look at me. Later.
That night, before Sam goes to sleep, he walks to the gas burner and turns it on full blast. He moves close to the flowing fumes and breathes in deeply. Rachel and Joe briefly talk about their relationship, and we can see that Rachel is pretty conflicted with everything that's going on. Tony wakes up in the middle of the night and looks at his toy clown. A bright light flashes and the clown comes to life. The clown makes a lot of noise and Mrs. Goodman bangs on the ceiling to shut them up. Tony hears the pounding and declares that he hates Mrs. Goodman because she killed Harry. We cut down to Mrs. Goodman's apartment where someone is knocking on her door. When she answers, a pair of bolt cutters slip through the crack and cut her lock. A small explosive is then placed over the handle and the door is blown open to reveal a life-sized toy soldier. The soldier shoots at the old woman, but she runs away and hides. The soldier sweeps through the apartment, checking the curtains and closets before he sees Mrs. Goodman's hand dart from beneath the couch for a chocolate sweet. The soldier walks to the couch and stabs through it, ending the old woman's life. The next morning, Joe packs a bag and leaves, leaving a note behind as well. He's got a little apartment over his photo studio where he keeps his pet parrot that he thinks he'll be staying in for a little while. Rachel and Annalise are doing some laundry when Rachel finds a photo of a woman and a stack of cash in the jacket that Sam was wearing. When she asks Sam about the woman, he says that he doesn't know who she is and that he knows nothing about the money either. Rachel goes to Joe's studio and tells him that she is taking Sam to their cottage, hoping that being in a familiar place will help Sam get his memories back. She shows Joe the photo as well, but he's fairly upset, so he doesn't really offer any help. Tony stays home with Annalise, but when her boyfriend comes over, Annalise tells Tony to play on his own so that she can lay down. Tony bangs on her door demanding to play a game of hide and seek, and she begrudgingly agrees. She hears the front door open and sees the elevator descend. She chases it downward, but Tony doesn't get out of the elevator, and then it begins to ascend back to the apartment, with Tony eerily calling her name. Annalise goes into the elevator where the clown is waiting. Tony and the clown drag Annalise into the apartment, and Tony begins to suck on her belly, causing bulbous blue veins to appear all over her stomach. Rachel and Sam arrive at the cottage and notice that the gas stove is on. They open up some windows and go for a walk, letting the place fume out. Annalise's boyfriend goes looking for her, and we see a remote-controlled tank begin to follow him around. He notices the toy and leans down to get a closer look when it suddenly shoots at him and takes out a chunk of the wall. The tank chases him through the apartment, shooting the entire time, but he's able to slip into a bathroom for a moment of reprieve. Inside the bathroom, he sees Annalise, covered in webs and boils before the tank finds him again and shoots the door down. The tank then chases the man down the hall where a black panther is waiting. The large cat jumps on the man and eats him. While on their walk, Sam begins to shiver and he's very cold to the touch. Rachel gets him back to the cottage and gets a fire started to heat them up. Rachel goes to call and check in on Tony, and we see Sam itch his head and pull out a chunk of flesh. Back to the apartment, the clown knocks the fridge to the ground, and when the phone rings, he goes to it and pulls it from the wall. Rachel then calls Mr. Knight, who is the landlord, and asks him to go check in on Tony. In the apartment, we see that Annalise is transforming, and she begins to produce eggs from her new little egg tube thingy. The clown harvests the eggs and places them into a slimy concoction in the horizontal fridge. Mr. Knight knocks on the apartment door, but no one answers, so he heads back downstairs. When he gets to the bottom, everything goes dark, and he hears someone in the darkness. He calls out when a toy covered in blades shoots from the shadows and cuts the man's throat. Rachel calls Joe and asks him to go check on Tony since she hasn't heard from Mr. Knight. While on the phone, Joe is looking at the photo from Sam's jacket, and he notices that the picture is of the same woman that was recently in the newspaper, a woman who was found brutally murdered. We see Sam touch the phone line at the cottage and melt it, causing the phones to now be useless. Joe tries to call and warn Rachel, but he can't get through, so he storms out. Tony is there just sitting on Joe's car, saying that Annalise dropped him off, and Joe doesn't question it. He gets in the car and tells Tony to hop in because they're going to head to the cottage and check in on his parents. While Rachel and Sam are getting, down and dirty, Rachel feels blood and is worried that Sam has hurt himself. When she turns on the light, we see that Sam is covered in wounds that are seeping blood and green fluid. Rachel tries to help him, but Sam slaps her away. As Sam gets dressed, we see that he is completely falling apart. Joe and Tony arrive at the cottage, and Joe leaves Tony in the car with the doors locked. He then sneaks into the cottage and finds Rachel. She tells Joe that they have to leave now, and they rush out the front door. We see then that Tony has snuck out of the car, and he reunites with his dad. Tony's face is covered in the same greenish wounds that Sam is, and they seem to share an unspoken moment before walking into the woods hand in hand. Joe and Rachel run after them, but Sam turns and begins to screech, causing Joe to clutch at his ears before he collapses, dead. Rachel still runs after her child, and we see the slow disintegration of Sam as she sprints through the foliage. Rachel slows when she sees a bright light. She wanders close and sees that the strange figures that were once her husband and son are basked in a blinding light. But a moment later, they seem to disintegrate entirely into the light and vanish into the night. Rachel, completely helpless, wanders to where her family had just been standing and sits. Sometime later, Rachel returns to her apartment. Inside, she finds the fridge full of eggs. She picks up one of the squelching spheres and sees the embryo inside pulsate before it erupts from its shell and latches on to her mouth. And that's where the movie ends. Extro was awesome, man. I loved it. It was weird. It was the perfect kind of weird for the mood that I was in, and rewatching it, I'm like, yeah, this movie holds up. It's not just a mood kind of thing. It's like, no, this movie's weird in the best possible way. It's an alien movie mixed with a relationship movie, and it's not afraid to be strange. They have this clown be a pretty major character throughout the second half. They have this panther show up out of nowhere. They have, Annalise suddenly becoming this spider woman laying eggs. It's very strange, but it all kind of fits together in the strangeness that makes you think it could be not real necessarily, but, part of this universe. It all fits in really well. I definitely recommend this movie for anyone looking for a really weird good time. But yeah, I ramble. I can't help myself but ramble. So I'll go ahead and stop rambling and just say, hey, if you want to be safe from the next alien invasion, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you guys on the next video. Bye-bye.
What's up? What's up? What's up?